Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Touch. Every touch is a step forward. By Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom. And by No Foods. No grain, no gluten, no guilt.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, insulin prices continue to go up with no signs of slowing down. A frank conversation with the folks at Eli Lilly, including the issue of state legislators pushing for more price transparency.
The transparency in itself won't solve the issue. You need real solutions. And so that's why I think it's important for everyone, and that's what we're trying to do, is to work across the healthcare system to really fix this high deductible problem right now by bringing real solutions. And so I think that's where we need to put our efforts. Transparency is interesting. It's fine. We have nothing to hide.
Mike Mason, Vice President of U.S. Diabetes Business at Lilly, and Dr. Sherri Martin, Medical Affairs VP at Lilly, answer your questions. We also get some news on the timeline for nasal glucagon and a word about Lilly's new push into encapsulation. In our Know Better segment, we'll talk about that emergency glucagon, how it works, what mini-gluc is, and a little more about this upcoming nasal version. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. Diabetes Connections aims to educate and inspire about type 1 by sharing stories of connection, talking to celebrities, artists, authors, leaders in our community, also asking tough questions like we're doing this week of healthcare companies and speaking to the tech folks that are pushing things forward. Also love speaking to everyday people, and I put that in quotes, who are living day to day, not climbing up Mount Everest, but going to work and school and living life with type 1. My son was diagnosed right before he turned 2 with type 1 diabetes. He is now 13 years old. My husband has type 2. I don't have diabetes. I have a background in broadcasting, local radio, and TV. That's how you get the podcast. Now, this week's topic is insulin pricing, of course. There is a lot of information here, and as I had limited time with the Lilly executives, as is often the case, it goes fast. I really tried to get a lot of questions in, but I would urge you, please check out the show notes for lots of background information from reliable sources. As everybody knows, this is a complicated issue. There's politics involved. There are, a lot of numbers involved. You can certainly listen to the interview. I don't think it's too complicated to understand, but I think, I know I always like to make sure there are links. I like to read more when I hear about stuff like this. So I'm trying to include a lot of information for you to go and look at. The show notes, as you're listening on a podcast app, should be right there on your phone or your mobile device. If you're listening on social media, it might be a little difficult to find. You can always go to diabetes-connections.com. And the show notes are there. Okay, a few things you likely already know in terms of info, but just so we're all on the same page here, the list price of insulin has increased almost 300% in the last decade. During the interview, we talk about 200%, but that is a specific study that ended in 2013. The price, and we're talking Humalog, Novolog, injectable insulin, continues to rise well above inflation. Now, of course, most people, me included, don't pay the list price. But more and more have to pay more because of these high deductible plans with insurance gaps, with problems. And speaking of that, to insurance, I checked and we have 3 people in our local group of 500 plus right now. I'm the admin for a Facebook group here in Charlotte, North Carolina for parents of kids with type 1. And right now, 3 posts in the last 24 hours asking for insulin. 2 people who have no insurance and 1 with a month-long lapse coming up. Look, we'll rally, we'll help each other out, we'll get them what they need, but this is no way to operate. This is bananas. I am not naive enough or egotistical enough to think that this interview will have a monumental change. But I do think that continuing to press the issue, continuing to have these conversations, all of us becoming more and more educated and having the tools and the words to not only talk about it among ourselves, but to contact our legislators, that sort of thing, is really important. So we will get to that interview in just a second. Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. One of the best features of the Dexcom G5 Mobile are the customizable alerts and alarms. Customizable threshold alerts provide advance warning of lows and highs before they happen. And that helps Benny, my son, when he is distracted. Who isn't distracted during life, and especially a 13-year-old kid? We really have found it incredibly helpful to troubleshoot high blood sugars before they get too high and catch lows before they get too low. Overnights, it gives me a lot of peace of mind. I just think it helps everybody sleep better. I don't like the idea of using a continuous glucose monitoring system without alarms. It just wouldn't work for us. Find out more about the Dexcom continuous glucose monitoring system at diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. My guests this week are Mike Mason, Vice President of U.S. Diabetes Business at Eli Lilly, and Dr. Sherri Martin, Medical Affairs Vice President at Lilly. Dr. Martin worked in endocrinology in rural Mississippi for 20 years before moving to her current position, so she knows a lot about affordability. I'm going to warn you in advance. I did not bring my pitchfork or my torch to this conversation. I was honestly just curious to hear what they had to say. I did solicit questions from listeners in our Facebook group, so you will hear those. And I didn't filter those questions. Like my son, these are people whose lives depend on what Lilly and Sanofi and Novo Nordisk manufacture. Again, I had limited time. I apologize if any of this seemed rushed. And I should also say I have not yet contacted the other two insulin makers, but I do hope to talk to them in the weeks to come. This is an ongoing conversation. With all that said, here's my talk with Mike Mason, again, VP of U.S. Diabetes Business, and Dr. Sherri Martin, Medical Affairs VP, both at Lilly. Mike and Sherri, thanks for spending some time with me today. I appreciate it.
Hi, Stacey. It's Mike Mason. Thanks for having us. We look forward to a good discussion on a very important topic to many of those that we love and serve, as well as individuals here. So welcome the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us, Stacey.
Thank you very much. A lot of questions about the price of insulin, of course, but I want to start by addressing two items in the very recent news that are not insulin, but they are Lilly. And the first is all about nasal glucagon. Can you speak to the latest studies on this and maybe to the timeline? And for people who are maybe not familiar, this is a product that's been in clinical studies, it seems, for a couple of years now, where instead of having to take that big emergency, scary-looking shot of glucagon, it could be as simple as a nasal spray. And maybe Dr. Martin, start with you on that.
So, Stacey, we are very excited about our ability to potentially bring forward a new treatment for severe hypoglycemia. Just as you commented, the solutions that we have available today do require that you have a caregiver or a companion to give an injection in the setting of severe hypoglycemia. The neat thing about nasal glucagon is that it's just a puff, a spray that can be administered into the nose. And needless to say, that requires very little pre-training skill determination by a caregiver or a companion, a school nurse, a coach, those kinds of environments where sometimes we do have unexpected severe hypoglycemia occur. My background, I shared a little bit earlier when we were discussing, is that I spent 20 years in the care of diabetes. And one of our great challenges around rescue treatment for severe hypoglycemia is having it available and having it be something that others can do. So just in the very recent weeks, we've had a most recent study published in Pediatric Diabetes around treatment of severe hypoglycemia in children and adolescents. And the data was very impressive in the sense that caregivers were able to administer the medication over 90% of times successfully. And of course, that's the key for the management of severe hypoglycemia, is that a person in the environment has to be able to administer the therapy. So we are moving forward. This is one of the final clinical studies in the plan, and we have committed that we believe we will be able to submit for regulatory review in the first half of 2018, and we are still on track for that timeline.
That is great news, because I know so many people who are afraid to even try to use the emergency shot of glucagon because it does seem complicated, and the nasal spray is something that as parents, we're waiting for. So I'm glad to hear that progress. And Mike, let me ask you, there's been this newly announced partnership with Sigilon, and this is stem cell research, right? This is encapsulation research. Why does Lilly want to partner and get involved with stem cell treatment for type 1?
Well, I'll start off and then hand it off to Sherri. She's the medical genius here that can give you even more information. But for us, we were the first company in the world to commercialize insulin back in 1923. We are a U.S.-based company that started out in 1876. But, our heritage, our foundation as the first American diabetes company is to support the needs of people living with type 1 diabetes. And so for us, we don't want that to stop now. We want that to continue. We know that there's a lot of unmet needs in the type 1 community. It's very important to us, and we're very excited about this partnership and this technology that Sherri will go over.
So it's sometimes not always apparent to people when we have research efforts that don't end up working. They don't turn out to be a positive outcome. But I've had the pleasure since I've been at Lilly to be involved with even a previous attempt, immunology therapy for prevention of type 1 diabetes. Unfortunately, though we had a significant investment and patients participated in the study, it didn't work. And so we had to stop that effort. But we've continued to look for opportunities to be able to impact and halt either the prevention or the progression of type 1 diabetes. This recent effort is one that was originally sponsored with some grant dollars from the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. So this is a nice example of how an advocacy group that is so important to type 1 diabetes began some of this work with Sigilon. And now, after some promising animal data, we are ready to move forward with further testing. So our goal is to partner with Sigilon to help continue to explore, can this technology work? And hopefully, if we continue to have positive results, be able to even bring this into humans and begin human testing at some point in the future. So we're excited about another opportunity in the type 1 space, and we are committed to offering a solution that involves therapy beyond insulin therapy.
Well, and that leads me to a question a listener had. Aaron had written in and wanted to know if he could ask how Lilly can reconcile an investment into cure-based research by a company that stands to be hurt financially if it succeeds, right? If people don't need insulin anymore, what happens to Lilly? I guess he's asking about, why partner with Sigilon to do that?
Well, I mean, it goes back to what we care about. I mean, to be honest with you, there's be nothing that make me happier if no person living with type 2 or type 1 diabetes would need insulin and we could have a cure for it. So there's many unmet needs in the marketplace in many therapeutic areas. And so there's ample opportunity for us to meet the needs. And so there would be nothing that would bring more pleasure to us, especially with someone who has 4 immediate family members who have or living with diabetes on a daily basis, that day to come. So I hope it does. Obviously, I hope it's us that brings that, but I hope it comes, yes.
Let's move on and talk about the price of insulin. I don't think we need to set the table too much because people know the cost has risen incredibly 200% from 2002 to 2013, according to the Journal of the American Medical Association. There are a lot of questions about why. How much does it cost you to actually make a vial of Humalog? How much profit you make on each? Can you just take us a little bit through, as much as you can, how the pricing is set? I mean, we know the American healthcare system is complicated. I don't think anybody thinks it's a great system. But can you take us through a little bit, or share what you can, about how and why it's priced the way it is?
Okay. No, I'm happy to do that. I'll share everything that I can on a public forum. Unfortunately, in public forums, because of laws, I'm not able to openly speak about how we set our prices, what our exact rebates are, how much we make, because the government they want price competition. They don't want that information publicly so that our competitors could hear from that. And so they want to avoid price collusion. So I can't speak openly in a public forum like this. But I think what most people care about is what price they have to pay when they go to the pharmacy. I know that as we go, and we've done a lot of work because we know this is important to people. We've talked to a lot of patients who live with type 1 and type 2 diabetes, a lot of people in the healthcare community and in the payer community to really understand, why are people paying more? Why the out-of-pocket burden has gone up? And so essentially what we've done over the years is we've paid steep discounts to insurance companies and to the government. And about 99% of the people who use insulin have insurance either through the government or through commercial insurance through their employer. And so we pay steep discounts. And actually the price that we receive from insurance companies has gone down, been flat to declining since 2009. But what we see, though, is the price that some patients pay has gone up. And when you take a look at what determines the price that a patient pays at the pharmacy, it's really determined by their insurance coverage. And so some have a fixed copay amount, some have a co-insurance where they pay 1%, some pay have a high deductible plan where they have to pay full list price and during the high deductible phase, and then after they do that, after they satisfy their overall deductible, it goes into their either a co-insurance or copay. What we've noticed over time, and what's surprising to us, and I think the biggest change of why people are paying more right now, it's really the acceleration of these high deductible plans, and that is where we see as the biggest challenge. And it's really insurance companies are very much trying to bring premiums down in order to satisfy the needs of employers, especially in commercial insurance. And they've moved to these high deductible plans to get premiums low. But those premiums are low. Part of the reason is the rebates that we pay to get on formulary are not passed on to patients on insulin at the pharmacy. They're used to pay down, they're basically used to make premiums lower for the general population, including people with diabetes. But those individuals, when they go to the pharmacy, they don't benefit from those rebates at that time. And so as we look at this and we say, okay, how can we come up with solutions? Because at the end of the day, all people really want is how do you come up with solutions, is why we went out with two programs, one with called Insider X, one called Blink Health, in order to give people discount who are in the high deductible or who are paying cash. And so you can learn about those discount programs at insulinaffordability.com. And I would encourage anyone who are in high deductible plans or are paying cash that by all means go to insulinaffordability.com, and there's some real valuable programs there to help out.
Well, there's a lot there to unpack, and I want to go back to the one of the very first things you said, which was, that you cannot speak to the pricing. It's interesting to me because there's been a call from the government, mostly at the state level, really, for more price transparency. I mean, as we're speaking today, out in Colorado, it's out of committee, but it's not yet been voted on by the House. It's actually going to be debated soon after we finish talking. But some state legislators are taking this up as an issue, creating laws that will make it mandatory. And right back to Mike to answer that question. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by OneTouch. Have you ever tested your blood sugar with a meter and were unsure about the meaning of your result? Take the guesswork out of your numbers with the OneTouch VarioFlex meter. It uses color-sure technology to instantly show you when your or your loved one's blood sugar numbers are low, blue, in range, green, or high, red, so you can quickly get on with your life. You can also use the meter's built-in Bluetooth smart technology to seamlessly sync with the OneTouch Reveal mobile app, available now as a free download for Android devices on Google Play and Apple devices in the App Store. OneTouch, because taking a step forward starts with seeing where you are. Now back to Mike Mason. What could Lilly and other insulin makers lose by opening this information up freely? I mean, why wait for the legislation? Why not just do it now?
The reason why you won't have us pushing that is because legally we can't do that based on, what I had said in the earlier question. Pricing transparency, I think it's interesting in that it will help educate people on kind of the complex health system and how each member of the healthcare system, kind of how they retain value. The transparency in itself won't solve the issue. You need real solutions. And so that's why I think it's important for everyone across, and that's what we're trying to do, is to work across the healthcare system to really fix this high deductible problem right now by bringing real solutions. And so I think that's where we need to put our efforts. Transparency is interesting. It's fine. We have nothing to hide, but we can't push it because of the legal situation I explained earlier.
Sherri, let me ask you, and as you mentioned, you're a physician. You've been working with people in Mississippi for 20 years, many of whom I assume have issues paying for insulin. What did you advise them at that time, and what would you advise people today who are having trouble? Walmart sells insulin for $25, but it's not the latest and greatest. It's not the more recent formulary. What do you tell people?
Well, it's a situation that I think is very dependent on each patient that you're treating. And, of course, it is one of the opportunities that you have when you know a patient's specific situation, their family situation. You learn as you take care of people, you learn more about what their insurance programs are. There are people who I would advise to use a Walmart branded insulin that's a human insulin product. Probably not as ideal for their lifestyle accommodation in terms of the action profile, but it was the right thing to do for that individual. Of course, in a rural community like I served, I did have access to, my patients had access to public assistance programs such as Medicaid, Medicare, and used a fair amount of those resources. And then there were times when my staff and I did need to advise patients and help them navigate through patient assistance programs such as copay cards and sometimes very specific patient assistance programs. The piece that I appreciate around what our insulins team has done is to organize that group of information that we can sponsor and support at Lilly at the insulinaffordability.com site. That's a resource that wasn't available to me at the time, and we had to navigate through multiple channels sometimes to find the right and best solution for patients. But it was always our goal, of course, to make certain that people had what they needed.
Mike, let me ask you, and this is a question from Melinda, who would like to know what keeps Lilly from selling Humalog like, quote, Walmart insulin, which is, as we've mentioned, is older NPH, our insulin, regular insulin. If people are not familiar, we've actually done episodes on that. It is a different formulary than we are talking about now. But so Melinda asks, what keeps Lilly from selling Humalog like Walmart insulin? They could keep more of the profit and would be free from the insurance PBM influence. Cut out the middleman, she says. We all want Lilly to have money to create new products. Kind of a twofold question, but why can't you do that? I mean, we didn't even mention PBMs yet, but they're getting a lot of attention as having, bringing prices up.
No, it's a good question. And actually for years, Walmart doesn't make the insulin. They either buy it from Novo or Lilly. And so some years it's been a Novo product. Sometimes it's been a Lilly product. Right now it's a Novo product. So we have worked with Walmart. It's the difference between Humalog and Humulin is that Humulin doesn't require a prescription. And that's why it's really helpful and very convenient for people to be able to go to Walmart without a prescription and pick it up at a low price. Once you start getting the prescription, having it through your insurance plan, it works out better. And so for us, that's the main reason why we have human insulin at Walmart at a Reliant brand and not Humalog.
I guess that to follow up on that, why not look at the market and look at the changes? Amazon made a huge stir when they said, we're just going to offer healthcare without the PBMs. We're going to change this. We don't like the way it is. I know Lilly doesn't run the healthcare system. I don't mean to imply that. But why not look for creative solutions like that where you could perhaps try to take out the middleman more? I mean, would you even want to do that?
No, it's a good question. I think you have to look at the value that the middlemen provide. When we talk about middlemen, you talk a lot about insurance companies and pharmacy benefit manufacturers, or PBMs. What they do is they form and provide a valuable role where, if you're a company or a small business, you don't want to necessarily go out and partner and contract with every single pharmaceutical company for every single product. There's thousands of pharmaceutical products out there. And so that, if you're in the human resource group of a company, then it's a lot easier to go to an insurance company, to go to a pharmaceutical benefit manager to get your business. So they say they provide a great service and convenience. And so, employers, what we hear is, no, they very much value them, and they want those decisions to be consolidated so that they can make it easier for them. And then, as you're talking to the government programs, those are different and structured differently. And, for example, for Medicaid, our rebates right now for Medicaid are actually 100%. And so we rebate 100% of our price back to Medicaid, as well as pay to have the products brought to the pharmacy so people can pick it up in the pharmacy. And so from there, there's no value in going directly, just because we literally make no money. We actually lose money going to Medicaid.
One of the questions I got from listeners over and over again, and I'll read up Leah's on this, and she says, why do I have to pay 10 times as much for insulin in the U.S. than I did for the 9 months when we traveled around the world? How can they, Lilly, justify price gouging Americans? Do we really have to support the research program for the rest of the world? It's families like ours that are self-employed and have high deductible plans that really feel the full cost of insulin here. Almost every time I fill the prescription, the pharmacist apologizes to us for how much it costs. Can you speak to that, why it costs so much more in America than in the rest of the world?
Yeah, I focus on the U.S., so it's hard for me to talk about the price outside the U.S., but I would recommend that she goes directly to insulinaffordability.com. We have a program that provides 40% discount for our insulins for those that are in high deductible plans, and that could be direct savings. And Stacey, that's where I want to applaud you. I know you work hard, and these type of podcasts and what you do is so critically important, because we go out, we understand the needs, we put in programs to help people afford. We have some programs where, based on income levels, we'll give free insulin. We'll have others to help people who are paying cash or in high deductible plans. We'll have others that help people in commercial insurance plans. And unfortunately, you look at this, we advertise these, we put them on websites, and we communicate them out, but they're so underutilized right now. And I applaud you for having programs like this to really get the word out, because you can provide great service to people who needs help during the high deductible plan. And, a 40% savings, she'll feel that, tomorrow.
Well, we'll link everything up in the show notes. I think that I appreciate the kind words. I think some of my listeners are rolling their eyes and want me to ask, well, why do we need the discount programs? The patent was sold for $1. If you kept it that way, I wouldn't need a discount program. Mike, I ask you this knowing that you personally do not set the price of insulin.
Yeah.
But, don't you ever think that to yourself?
Well, you're assuming, if you look at the innovation that we brought since 1923, we're not making the same insulin we did in 1923 as we do today. If you look at just in the last several years, we have spent $1.5 billion just on manufacturing facilities to make high quality insulin. And so we pour pharmaceutical products. Lilly in general spends more money on R&D than any other industry, and we are at the very high end of pharma in our R&D spend. So the money we make, we pour back into research and development so that we can help the future people who have type 1 and type 2 diabetes, as well as other therapies. I don't know, Sherri, if you have anything else you want to add.
Well, I think we started out the top of our discussion highlighting the fact that we're continuing to work toward improved treatments for type 2 diabetes, potential for a cure for type 1 diabetes. Right now in the pipeline, we have even further innovation that we are exploring in the insulin space, both basal and rapid acting. So the key for us is that in order for us to continue to do what we believe is very important work to support the future of treatment for diabetes, that we do need to make some of these investments. without these investments, there will not be the future innovation.
As I go through my questions from listeners, Wendy wanted to ask about the role of the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, as most people call it, if that played in any role in the price increase lately. Now, I hesitate to get too far into politics because there have been Republicans in power and Democrats in power, and the price of insulin has gone up. But can you speak to that at all? Did the Affordable Care Act, change things in any way?
No, I think, as I indicated earlier, the prices that we receive, our net prices have actually gone down, not up, since 2009. And so I think the main thing that you've seen is an evolution of insurance design. And some patients, depending on their insurance design, will pay more. I think what you also see is what's changed a lot since 2008, 2010 is at that point, there was open access so that all insulin was typically on someone's insurance formulary. Now they've gone to typically, especially in the commercial setting as well as the Part D session, about 90% of plans have either Novo insulins or Lilly mealtime insulins on their formulary. And so sometimes we'll get, a lot of times when we get calls about, hey, I was paying $25, now I'm paying a couple $100. Why did you increase the price so much? It's because Humalog was on formulary and then it went off formulary, and then that patient, it's best for that patient to switch over to Novolog so they can get it back at a low copay.
Can I just go on the record that I hate that? I want to pick my insulin. We used Novolog for a long time. And then as happens to many people, a formulary, the insurance company said, no, time to switch to Humalog. And it worked fine for us. We're very fortunate. My son doesn't have any adverse problems or any problems with either one. But I can't, it makes me crazy that as a patient, I can't say I'd like that. I guess that's really just a comment and not a question. Let me ask it this way. And this is actually a question from Samantha, one of my listeners, who says, can you work with Novo Nordisk to try to keep Novolog and Humalog on formularies? Now, I know as a business, it's not often that you'd work with the competition, but is that something that has ever come up?
Well, we get the question quite a bit. I don't look very good in orange or stripes, so obviously that probably wouldn't be a good thing for me to do. But I think what's more importantly, what we try to do is we try to work across the healthcare system, work with pharmaceutical benefit managers, work with insurance companies on what we'll listen to people who are on insulin for their diabetes, will understand their issues, and then try to come up with real solutions. And the programs that are on insulinaffordability.com are ones that we partnered with people in the healthcare system that we've worked together on solutions in order to effectively lower our price by 40% for those who pay cash. And so I think that's the best way we can work together, is on real solutions like that. That's what the legal system allows us to do, and I think that's the thing that we have an obligation to do, and that's what we're trying to do.
One of the more frightening aspects of this that has gotten a lot of attention, especially on social media, is a few deaths that people have very much publicized and retweeted and shown on Facebook, including, Shane Patrick Boyle, who started this GoFundMe campaign to raise money for insulin, but he died a few weeks later. And it was said to be because he could not afford insulin. So James, and he is on the T1 International board, he asked me to ask the question, has the board of Eli Lilly discussed the deaths of people from lack of insulin in the U.S.? Does Eli Lilly believe that access to insulin is a human right?
So I'll answer on this, Stacey. We are very committed. I think Mike's talked about it in a number of venues around trying to make certain that patients have access to insulin and providing solutions for individuals who sit in those arenas where there is some barrier to access. Unfortunately, as we know, there are a number of factors that typically contribute to any untimely death in a chronic disease, and type 1 diabetes is one of those that is typically can be a very complex condition for some individuals, and unfortunately associated with end organ effects. We would always state that, of course, that is an undesired outcome, and clearly one of the reasons that we continue to make the investment in research around a cure, around prevention, around treatment of end organ complications, such that the mortality associated with these diseases, specifically in the situation type 1 diabetes, that we have a potential to change that in the future. But in terms of the insulin affordability and the insulin access, we hope that people will find the solutions that we're offering helpful.
Yeah. Stacey, please help us. We have so many great programs out there that can help people who can't afford insulin to make it more affordable. And please help us get the word out. We can help more patients than we can right now, and it's just a lack of education and awareness. And please have people go to insulinaffordability.com. We don't want anyone that have any affordability issues not to get their insulin.
Well, I'll do my best. And before we wrap it up here, because I know we're running out of time, I didn't mention, and I should really get this out. Mike, you have family members with diabetes, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I have 4 immediate family members. Actually, the reason I joined Lilly 29 years ago was because of that, and started out in our research and development area where we're trying to design and figure out how to make Humalog at a manufacturing level. And so, and been associated with trying to help people live better lives with type 1 and type 2 diabetes for the last 29 years.
And let me just give you both the last word on this. As we look forward to, what may happen in the next couple of years, hopefully we do have these innovations as you're talking about. We did start off talking about gene therapy and stem cell therapy, and I hear things about faster insulins. I'm not quite sure how to ask this, so I'll just barge in as I usually do and ask it anyway. Why not, as you said, you don't look great in orange or stripes. Why not make Lilly the hero here? Why not take a stand and say, hey, Novo, hey, Sanofi, we need to figure out a way to drop these prices, not just with the rebate programs, and I promise I'll do my best to get the word out about that. But, when I look at my insurance lately, the last 90-day order of insulin I ordered for Benny, it was $2,400 that my insurance company paid, and I paid $135. I don't know if those numbers are real. It seems ridiculous. Why not just find a way and dedicate somebody to say, look, we're going to be the leader here, and we're going to figure out a way to bring this price increase under control to a decent level?
It's a good question, and know that we are having those conversations right now. We've had them for years here. And the U.S., to make medication in the U.S. and follow all the regulations, there's a lot of regulations of what you can and cannot do. And so, believe me, we have a lot of ideas that are really helpful, and then we can't do that because it's outside regulation. So what we've done is we sat there and said, okay, within the area that we can work and maneuver in, how can we best partner with the healthcare systems to bring real solutions to the marketplace? That's what we've done with the solutions that are on insulinaffordability.com. You're seeing some real change. You're seeing, United Healthcare recently announced that for their employees that they are going to pass rebates onto pharma medication rebates onto their members. That is a huge, huge, huge step to fix this. And I think you'll see, hopefully more people understand this issue around high deductible plans and really, come up with a solution to fix that. And so we play a role, I think, pharmaceutical benefit members, employers, and insurance companies plays a role. And the best for us is to work with them on real solutions. And I know I've said it a couple times in this podcast, but please go to insulinaffordability.com. There's some real help there.
I think from my perspective, after the opportunity to be able to come and work in pharmaceutical research and being able to think about new solutions, that for me, that's the important aspect of our future, is what else can we do to help to continue to improve the lives of people who live with type 1 or type 2 diabetes. And that's what gets me up every day and makes me excited about the work that I do.
Well, Mike Mason, Dr. Sherri Martin, thank you so much for taking my questions, for taking my listeners' questions, and sharing what you can about this issue. I hope we talk again, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Stacey. Obviously, an important topic, and thanks for what you do on a daily basis for those living with diabetes.
Thank you.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
Well, there you go. Again, I appreciate them coming on very much. Obviously, there's a lot more that we could have discussed. And there is one point I didn't make during the interview, a follow-up I wish I had asked. I realized when I listened back. What regulations are preventing Mike from talking about price, right? Well, he said that right up front. Doesn't the government want more pricing transparency? Well, I asked them to send me whatever regulations they were referring to. So they emailed me a few notes about that. I'll put that in the show notes so you can see what they were talking about there. But the information they sent over was about antitrust law, Sherman Act preventing arrangements among competing businesses to fix prices, releasing details of pricing structures exposes companies to these kinds of allegations, and contract law. They point out that a lot of the details of their business are confidential for competitive reasons. Releasing them could breach a contract and could also be seen as an attempt to communicate with competitors. So there's liability there under the Sherman Act and other antitrust laws. I will put those in the show notes so you can read them for yourself. And there will be a lot more information on this insulin pricing issue. We've done other interviews, previous shows with activists who are very much trying to push this issue and legislators who want more transparency. This is far from done. It's the beginning of the conversation for me. I do urge you to reach out to your state legislators, to other activists. Let them know how you feel, and I'll do my best to continue to ask questions here. In our Know Better segment this week, all about glucagon, some basics, some more advanced stuff. What is mini-gluc? And more on what was called leucemia, the nasal spray that we referred to in the interview with Lilly. Know Better is brought to you by Know Better Foods. And Know Better. They make these amazing gluten-free bready items like buns and muffins and donuts and wraps. Eating gluten-free has really helped me to feel better. My doctor recommended it last fall. And of course, so many people with type 1 have celiac disease where you can't eat gluten at all. And No Foods gets it. They know you want food that tastes good. So they use almonds and coconut and egg whites, and it really does taste great. I urge you to check them out. You can go to diabetes-connections.com, click on the No Foods logo. We have contests all the time on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and with our Facebook group where we give away gift cards. So please check it out, and you can always use the promo code Stacey10 to save on any order. During the interview with Lilly, we talked about nasal glucagon, and I'll get to that again in just a minute. But I thought this was a good opportunity to kind of go through some of the basics of glucagon. We did an entire show on that, and I'll link that up in the show notes as well. But I've come across a lot of people who think that this is a sugar shot. They're injecting sugar directly into the body. And that's not the case at all. Glucagon is the emergency kit. It comes in a red box, and it can come in an orange box too. There's some different manufacturing, different brands here. But glucagon is not itself sugar. Instead, it tells your body to release sugar, to release glucose into the bloodstream to bring blood glucose back up. This is not for a low where the person is talking and saying, oh, I feel lousy. That's a juice box. That's some dextrose or some candy, something like that. This is for severe low blood sugar, loss of consciousness. You can't eat. You can't drink. You need help. So this is not something that most of us ever want to use or want to have used on ourselves. But it is something that anybody who has type 1, I would think many people with type 2, although I'm not as familiar, would want to be well versed in and teaching the people closest to you. I'm not going to go into great detail. I'm not an expert, certainly a healthcare professional. And we did, as I said, a whole show on glucagon in terms of how to use it or, how to store it. Please just read up on that. I'll link it up again. But I did want to talk about mini-glucagon. This is an off-label use of glucagon. It is not a different product, and it is not something you can just go and buy in a store. It's really called mini-dose glucagon rescue. And what happens here is when you dose someone with glucagon, you're supposed to give the whole thing or even half for very small kids. And that can make a lot of people, you go high. I mean, better to be high than to pass out, but it can be very jarring to the body. So a team from Texas Children's Hospital Diabetes Care Center, as far as I know, this originated with them. They came up with this idea to use very small doses of glucagon injected, just like you'd use a regular old syringe right under the skin. And if I didn't say that glucagon is normally given intramuscularly. It is not like a regular old shot of insulin with a tiny little syringe. So you would give this small dose with a syringe to help kids not go super low. And their instructions are to put the glucagon together as instructed in the kit, mix it up as instructed, but then to draw up the glucagon into an insulin syringe, 1 unit for every year of age. A 2-year-old gets 2 units, a 10-year-old gets 10 units, that sort of thing. I will link this up. I think it's very good information, knock on wood. We have not had to use any glucagon in Benny, but very fortunate in these 11 years. And again, I'm knocking everything on knock wood, knock my head. We only had one night that I remember where I was scared that we were going to have to use it. He was, we were treating and he was not moving. And then he vomited. He got sick. And then he was able to drink and keep things down. I'm not quite sure what that was all about. He was about 5 or 6 years old, and I thought, this is it, heading to the ER. But we were very fortunate. So, I would use mini dose if needed. I think it's a very interesting way to look at it. But knock on wood again, I say that all the time. My husband says knock on glass because his father had a glass company. We haven't had to do that. So just some information there about mini-gluc and what it is. Okay, so let's talk about nasal glucagon. If you've been around the diabetes community for a while, and I say that some of you are laughing because, I've only been here for 11 years and some of you are like, look, Stacey, I've been doing this for 50 years or more. But it seems like we've been talking about nasal glucagon forever. The last big news was that in October of 2015, Lilly acquired the worldwide rights to what was then Leucemia's nasal glucagon, and they have been making progress ever since. As they said, they expect to submit to the FDA in the first half of 2018 and submit pretty quickly to the EU and Canada right after that. And one of the big problems with glucagon, what they're trying to avoid here is the mixing and the steps. Because if you ever practiced with glucagon, and if you haven't, asked your educator, because you really should practice with expired kits, that sort of thing. You have to mix it and you have to, do like 6 steps before you can use it on somebody. And most studies have shown that caregivers mess it up somewhere because we're all nervous. And this happened to me. As I said, I haven't used it for real, but I went to a session at a conference where Gary Shiner from Integrated Diabetes, he is a very well-known CDE and the author of Think Like a Pancreas and lots of other stuff. He had this session on emergency glucagon, how to use it. And I was holding the shot incorrectly. And that's important because the way I was holding it with my finger on the trigger, with my finger on the back of the syringe, meant I could have pushed out the liquid before it went all the way into the skin, into the muscle, and that would have been a huge waste. So you're supposed to hold it like a dart, according to Gary, and I wasn't. So that would have been on the study parental use incorrect if they had tried it out. So the nasal spray, this just makes sense, right? Glucagon stays in a powder form. It's used just like, your Afrin, your Flonase, stuff like that, where you just squirt it up your nose. And in the last couple of studies, they found that almost 100% of the patients, it was 95.7% of patients who used it, had blood sugar levels close to normal within 30 minutes. You don't have to inhale it, really. It's absorbed into the cells of your nose, the nasal mucosa. So it's pretty cool stuff. I certainly know that Benny would be much more likely to carry it. It's much smaller. It's not clunky. And I can't wait for it. I think this will really, really help. Think about a daycare center or camp, stuff like that. I don't mean diabetes camp where everybody's trained. A day camp where kids go, or like my kid, non-diabetes sleepaway camp. So this will ease a lot of fears. And I'm hoping that they do make it to this first half because we've been hearing about it for so long. Of course, one of the questions is price, right? How is it going to be priced? What insurance companies are going to cover it? There's already a wide variety in how glucagon emergency kits are covered, so we will closely watch that as well. And now you know better. Lots of good events coming up. I always like to talk about that near the end of the show here. And I'm going to start posting that. I did this last week in the show notes every week. I'm working on improving the website. But for right now, the where Stacey will be in the show notes. And if you'd like to have me come speak at your event, please let me know. I am always up for talking about fun stuff, serious stuff. I've got several presentations, or just to come talk about the podcast. This week, I will be at Touched by Type 1. This is a women's conference in Orlando. Then I'll be at a Lilly conference. I spoke about this several weeks ago. It was rescheduled because of weather. This is a blogger summit, so we can see the new technology as they are moving into the diabetes device market. And full disclosure, they're paying for my travel, paying for one night at a hotel, assuming that after this episode airs, they still want to invite me. But I want to let you know because that's pretty standard. When I get invited to conferences, they'll pay for travel and for lodging. I'm not getting paid to attend these conferences. And ethically, I think it's really important that you know when I'm being reimbursed, when I'm being paid, and all that good stuff. I will be at the JDRF 1 Challenge, riding on insulin here in Charlotte later in May. This is a first-time event. Very excited. And we're going to be talking to Sean Busby from Riding on Insulin all about this event and about his struggle. He has lupus. May is Lupus Awareness Month, and we're actually going to be talking about Riding on Insulin's new campaign about living with more than one condition. So stay tuned for that. I'm very excited. That episode is scheduled for next week. So I really hope you can tune in for that. In July, it is the big family conference, Children with Diabetes Friends for Life. We will be taping a show live from the conference. I am thrilled about that. First time we're doing anything like that. And I'm helping out a lot with the raffle this year. That's a fundraiser, and I'll tell you more as we get a little bit closer. We'll see what pops up in August and September, but then in October, I'll be at Friends for Life in Falls Church, which is in Virginia. And it's just a smaller version, regional version of the big Friends for Life conference that they have in July. So again, let me know if I can speak to your group. I am happy to come out there and share whatever information I can. Thanks, as always, to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Quick turnaround here with this episode, and I appreciate that, John. And thank you all so much for listening. It is an honor and a privilege to do this show every week. I'm thrilled to have you listening. I hope I represented you well in this interview with Lily today, as I hope I do every week. And if not, you can certainly let me know about it. Please contact me, Stacey at diabetes-connections.com, or sound off on any of our social media channels. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here next week.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.